Gene, behind you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming out this evening for this very important meeting and this discussion this evening. Glad you all are here. We're kind of on a timeline since we have a choir practice at 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I'm going to have Richard come up and say a prayer and introduce our speaker.
I'm so glad you're here, too. It means a lot to your church to be together and talk about issues that are very important to the ongoing life in the future of this congregation as well as others. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Also, this is David Gehring. He and his wife, Carol, are a clergy couple. They were out here basically preaching at the same time I was. David served wonderful churches, concluded in Chapel Hill, didn't you? And Carol was the district superintendent. I worked with her some when I was in the cabinet. David is well informed about where we're going forward as a church, and he has made it his business to learn some about disaffiliation. That is our focus for tonight. So, David, welcome to Village Point. Let me have a prayer before you start talking. Holy God of grace, I thank you for the church. It's the place that we come and worship and live out our faith together, and then we depart in service, and we reflect you in our community. Thank you for this gathering. Thank you for David and for Jeff and his leadership. Be among us. Temper our hearts and minds as we make hard decisions together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Richard. Richard called me. When Richard called and asked if I would come, I didn't have any reservation. I appreciate my time with you. I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. My wife, Carol, I live there. We came into the United Methodist ministry at 70. I went to Duke Divinity School 75, came out in 78, so I started serving local churches in 78. My wife also. I concluded in 2018, and she concluded in 2019. I don't think that was me, was it?
Okay. Did that get your attention? I'm glad it wasn't connected to my heart. I would have felt like I was. I'm going to read a text. It's from Paul's letter to his friends in Philippi. If then there is any encouragement in Christ, any consolation from love, any sharing in the Spirit, any compassion and sympathy, make my joy complete. Be of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. If you were to dive into that, you realize the tense that Paul is using here in the language is present and future. So he's suggesting that we're not going to be there all in that spot. We're all loving and being like-minded in all things. He says we work towards that. That's what he's talking to his friends in Philippi. You know, we have to be moving in that direction. And he says that do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourself. Let each one of you look not to your own interest, but to the interest of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. So I'm here not to persuade or dissuade, but I am here to help you discern, where Village Point needs to be as a congregation and where you'd like to go. And so I'm open to some questions. And somewhere sooner than later in our time together, I can disclose some of the alternatives or options you might have as a congregation if you choose to do disaffiliation. So does anybody have a burning question? Yes.
It says here that, I really hate this thing. It says here that if we decide to split, that we get to keep the property and the building of our church. But does that leave us standing alone? Do we not have association with any other Methodist? And we can't call ourselves Methodist anymore?
Good question. Our annual conference, North Carolina annual conference, the trustees are the ones who, and this was about a year and a half ago, decided that any church that would choose to go on their own, that they could go with their property. You might hear that there are other conferences that don't do that. I think there's a Southwestern conference right now, or Texas conference that's saying you're going to have to ante up whatever the value of your property is. You have to pay that before you leave. Our annual conference, discerned that they were going to make it plausible and gracious for congregations. So yes, but if you were to disaffiliate any signage, anything that says United Methodist, you would have to remove the United part from it.
So we would be United Methodist anymore?
No.
If you remove the United, would it be Methodist?
Well, you can use Methodist, you can use Baptist, you can use whatever you want.
Well, if we just remove United, we just say we're a Methodist church, can we say that?
Yep. I don't know, personally, the Wesleyan tree, the Methodist tree, is a pretty big tree. And if you were to look at all the churches that have come out of Wesleyan, John Wesley's adventure in America, you would have to include all Pentecostal churches, holiness churches, the Wesleyan church, the Nazarene church. There's a whole, and then there's all kinds of shoot-offs from the African American church, the AME Zion, the AME Episcopal, the Episcopal South. So if you look at the Methodist tree, there's a whole lot of churches that have come from Wesleyan theology.
Can you tell me, is there any group that says if they break away from the United Methodist that they will become a new group?
Nobody that's trying to watch online can hear.
Yeah, speak again. We have some people looking.
Have that microphone. Where is it? Please talk into it.
Okay.
I'm asking, is there an organization that's going to be possible to join of all those that did
You could
break
join.
away?
You could join any one that I just said, and probably I know those. And there is a new formation called the Global Methodist Church, which has formed. It's formed like 3 months ago, 4 months. They've been in the process for many, many years, but in terms of officially, it's called the Global Methodist Church. GMC, for those who are automotive people. You can be UMC, or you can be GMC, or you could be independent. I know of congregations who've left the UMC, United Methodist Church, and just basically are independent. They may use the name Methodist, but for all practical purposes, they're not aligning themselves with any discipline or ordering of the church life. Now, if you went to any other denomination, you would have to do a little bit of research as to the polity, how they handle, appointments or pastoral support. You'd have to look at, how do they organize the church in terms of a council? How do you vote? I mean, these would be all requirements if you went to another denomination. And the Global Methodist Church has that in print, but I'll be honest with you, it's still a progress, because they have not had a general conference yet. So, what they're proposing is just on paper. There hasn't been any votes with the GMC yet. Yes.
Yeah, I don't need a microphone because I'm loud enough.
Okay.
It's my understanding that a majority of the churches that are
That's the reason for using
Yeah.
the phone. It's not that we can hear you, but it's so that.
Yeah. Well, no, the two questions. One is, it's my understanding the majority of the churches that are disaffiliating are joining the global church, and my perception is that's almost like the way we operate now with the existing book of discipline, although they're working to get it all fixed and put the places. Is that your understanding, number one? And number two, as a business person, I have never liked being boxed into a corner on anything. And for the life of me, I still don't understand why the United Methodist Church is not holding this conference in 2024 earlier, so that churches that are forced with this decision could at least know what the outcome of the decisions would be. I just don't get that. Never have.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I could respond to both of those. One would be my opinion. That would be the second one. But the first response to the first question would be the GMC will have an order very much like the polity, although I will speak at another point if it's not raised as a question in terms of the appointment system. It will be different than what we know. Say that first one again, the first question again. I'm sorry. Because there was
It's
something
my
else.
understanding that the majority of the
Oh, yeah,
churches that
that's
are
right.
disaffiliating have joined the Global Methodist Church, and that church would operate pretty much as we are now with the existing book of discipline, although I understand all the pieces have to be plugged into play and the process set up, yada, yada. Thank you.
I think you're accurate in that. I know, let me back up and say in our annual conference, 249 churches disaffiliated. The majority, 249 thus far, out of 860 some, don't we have 860?
When I was in the cabinet, there were 832.
Yeah.
When I was a superintendent.
We're still in that neighborhood, so, I mean, give or take a few off those numbers. That's just the North Carolina Conference. And you're going to hear through the grapevine, through different news sources, different annual conferences having other numbers. A good majority of the people in Central Texas have left. But, I could respond to that, but anyway. I think you're right in saying that, but of the 249 that have left the UMC here, actually not quite yet, it's still a small percentage of those who've joined GMC. They talked about joining GMC, okay? If you're now talking about those who have verbally said, we're going to join the GMC, you're right in saying that. Legally, I mean, signing the papers, and everything else, that has not been the case. But I think you're right in saying, potentially, I have some friends who have disaffiliated. I've heard their scuttlebutt, and some of that leadership team in North Carolina of the GMC, they're going around trying to get those people signed up. It'd be like a salesman going through town. I mean, they're literally now going to try to sign these people up, these churches, to be GMC. They haven't yet.
When do we have to make the decision?
There was a timeline there. Yes.
It might be a two-part question, depending on how you answer it. Are you affiliated with UMC?
Me, I will remain a retired minister in the United Methodist Church.
Okay, so if we decide to stay and y'all bring a preacher we don't like, can we send him back?
Yes. Yeah. That's your present. Yeah, your present pastor was a district superintendent. My wife served on the cabinet 2 different stints. Carol Gehring served 2 different stints. She was in the Fayetteville district superintendent, and then she became what used to be called the Durham district. Now it's called Corridor. I've had friends, and you certainly have friends who are superintendents of the bishops. I've been personally close to everyone but Bishop Blackburn, and he was my first bishop. And I kind of shook in my shoes when I came into his presence. He had all for him, so I never really got to know him. But every other bishop I've had time with, sit down mealtime, and with my wife, and I know this secondhand because it's her, but I was close to the conversations. Your President Pat Richard would be able to tell you, I don't know of a situation, personally, even when a cabinet felt like they needed to send somebody to a particular church, and if the church there was not a connection, and the Staff Parish Relation Committee simply said, this isn't working, that they didn't leave, that person didn't leave at the next appointment a year later at the most. I mean, there are some circumstances that sometimes people in the pews don't know about the big picture. So I have known where cabinet had to say, come back to the church folk and say, could you keep this person one more year? And I could give you some examples of that, but you just imagine. But after that, they were gone. I just don't know. If somebody else can tell me a story that's different from that. But in the UMC, you know.
Given these circumstances, a year could be a long time.
Well, I understand that. And if the situation's dire, then the superintendent has to be responsible for helping that church to get the situation rectified. You know, I see you shaking your head. You've had bad experiences then.
Yes, sir, I know of 2 instances where they asked for him to be removed, and it took 2 years.
Okay.
And also, there was one incident within the last year and a half. They were going to send someone to the church, and the church didn't want to accept them for various reasons, and they pulled out. They were one of the first to pull out because they couldn't come to.
Yeah, I hear you, but I'll tell you, in any given year, well, again, we have 830 some in our annual conference. I think historically, every year I know of, we have 120 some moves. Some of that's because people retired, people got sick, people said they had to leave, the church says they have to leave. You know, if you have, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 that there was not a connection, that things weren't right. I don't know. I don't know about your life, but my life, I mean, there's circumstances get to where it doesn't work out. I'll tell you this about GMC. They won't be any better about it. GMC will give you 5 names, 4 names, 3 names. And they say, now you interview those people, you pick one, and then you're stuck with them. They're not going to come in with somebody else. Then you say, well, this isn't working. Well, then they're going to give you 3 or 4 more names.
One of the things that we do, just FYI, is we are every year, and this has been going on for a long time, we move people at the end of the year. There's January 1st appointments as well.
Yeah.
So if things really are going bad, and I can call names, but that's a negative thing, so I won't. But there was somebody like at First Church Wilson, if you remember the big jogger, and he had been 10 years in Cary, and he left at an awkward time because they just didn't want him, and that was one of the largest appointments in the annual conference. So, but see, you're talking about exceptions. We moved, like he said. We had newsprint all over the walls and names, and we called it chains, and I had a notebook full. They'd say, let's move Tal Madison to camp, and let's take the guy at camp and move him to First Church Clinton, and then let's say, and it'd all be a chain, and then sometimes people wouldn't want them. And we would not send, we did not ever go to a church in the appointment process when I was a DS and say, you may not want him, but we're going to send him anyway. I've only known of one time in all of my career that they did that, and it was what it was. It was a congregational stronghold that needed to be broken, they felt like. I had nothing to do with it. I was just serving the church. And so you will have ins and outs anyway. It ain't going to get perfect anywhere you go. The United Methodist Church is not perfect.
No, I wouldn't say that.
No, I am, but the church is not. What you laughing at, Diane?
Yeah. Yes, in the back here.
Peggy had one first, and she's been patiently waiting to get there. Be right back.
I know at one time, because you were talking about if you get someone you don't like, and John's grandfather, the Methodist church he was in, that happened. One thing, we do have to keep an open mind, which sometimes is hard, because with Richard, especially retiring, we're used to Richard and his personality and the way he relates to the congregation. So we have to give the person a chance. But like at John's grandfather's church, he was the church treasurer, and they got an appointment that did not mesh. In a short period, just did not mesh. And they went to the district to try to district superintendent. They said, well, that's just too bad, you got to keep him. So John's grandfather, being who he was, he said, well, you pay him because I'm church treasurer and I will not write the check. They moved him.
We have a question
Yeah,
back in the back.
money talks, yeah.
I'm sorry, but with the Methodist church, I'm sorry, money talks. It talks.
Yeah, I wanted to try to get back to the disaffiliation. I realize that there's an element of that at some point, but Gene, you asked a second question, which I don't know got answered, which is, why is the conference not being held until 24, at which point, theoretically, they could decide to accept the paragraph?
Yeah, well, the COVID, I meant to answer that, I'm sorry. COVID stopped that one annual conference, and then we held a general conference met, and it called and chose not to do anything about. So we have not met since 20.
So all these churches that are disaffiliated are kind of making an assumption that when they meet in 24 that they're going to continue to deny the proposals.
Say that again.
Well, the crux of this is the two requests that created paragraph 2553. And the conference that you said was just held, they didn't change. They continued to go by paragraph 2553. So when the next opportunity isn't until 24.
Every annual conference has been acting, allowing, there may be somebody who's saying they're not allowing disaffiliations, but disaffiliations have started in, I think, last year. And it's based upon that paragraph.
Right. And the assumption of the disaffiliation is that it's not likely to change at future conferences, but they don't know.
Yeah, I think the move to disaffiliate, the assumption is that it will change. But we don't know that. That is the language of the discipline. There's a statement, and I could read the several paragraphs on humans. It's in the section on human sexuality. It is a wonderful display of the United Methodist Church's understanding of human sexuality. That's, it talks about pornography, it talks about against all kinds of perversions, there's all kinds of things. It holds people to the standard of celibacy outside of marriage, fidelity within marriage. I mean, it's a wonderful paragraph. There's a sentence in there that says, homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teachings. That came in 1972. Ever since then, all the way up until 2016, every 4 years we've been meeting as a general conference, and they've taken that one sentence, it's a sentence, but they've added penalty to pastors or churches that either ordained homosexual or did same-sex marriage. But the penalty could only be exercised if somebody brought charge. But if somebody brought charge against somebody, then they use that one paragraph of incompatibility. But each general conference, for 4 general conferences, they added penalties. Your question would be in 2024, are they going to change that, remove the paragraph, or are they going to leave the paragraph in, but no penalty to pastor or churches? That's the question we don't know. I mean, we really don't know the answer. So a lot of churches are leaving assuming that we are going to change that. But that's not, I mean, we've gone since 76, and it's gotten more stringent. So I don't know what 24 is going to do.
But the probability of that changing is greater because the conservative churches, conservative vote has been leaving. So the probability of it.
Well, I question that on this ground. I mean, that's been used as a thing. But the Southeast is still the strongest part outside of that in the African church and the Asian church, the Southeast Asian church. Had the most delegates of the 1,000 delegates. Let me get this out. Of the 1,000 delegates at our annual general conference, the Southeast and non-USA votes are still the greatest representation. Now, we say a church has left. How do we know that that church has a delegate? How do we, I mean, a delegate is I mean, there could be 1,000 churches leaving, but we don't know if they've taken any delegates. Do you know? I mean, no one's figured out who the delegates are the same ones that were there in 20, huh?
I'd say the probability that some of them.
Well, that's a big what if. We don't know. We don't know who they, you know. Yeah. And that would be the point that this gentleman was saying. You know,
and
people are rushing to a decision before the 24.
And that's.
And I think part of the reason why we're rushing forward to the 24, try everybody get online and do whatever they want to do before 24, is they don't know what the protocol will be. You know, right now we know that in North Carolina, we know what it is. But after the vote in 24, we don't know what would be required. And so I think that's where the anxiousness is.
Well, with that said, it seems like the cart's before the horse here, because
I have no trouble with
because
that.
everybody's trying to make a decision when in reality nothing has changed.
That's right. You're
so
right.
we don't know what's going to happen in 2024, and there's going to be a 3 or 4 month period where there might be something changed because a paragraph expires. But that's probably not going to make a huge change to this church during that 4 month period of time, waiting to find out what's going to happen. Is that correct?
I think that's a good statement. Yeah, I think in 20, I'll come on the backside of that, of this statement. I'm affirming that. I don't have, you know, there's not data to support us, so we're just making a conjecture. But I would think that in 24, we would know where the GMC is in terms of what they really can offer. And then secondly, you'll know where the UMC is in terms of how it's going to judiciously you know, work through the issue of human sexuality.
Can we wait until 24?
Yeah, there's nothing pushing that down. After 24, if the church wants to disaffiliate, I don't think that I'm now speaking from this annual conference perspective, knowing the trustees and the leader and the bishop we have and the leadership that we have, we're not going to be ungracious. We're not going to hold people's feet to the fire and crucify any church that feels like at some point down the road they need to leave. I just don't feel that. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, I do have a question. You said that the UMC has continued to hold its conservative stance. We have 6 divisions of the United Methodist Church. The East has a north and a south. The Central has a north and a south. The Western has a north and a south.
We call those jurisdictions. Yeah.
Jurisdictions. It is my understanding that both Western jurisdictions and the Northern Central jurisdiction has appointed and approved gay bishops.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I think I know of some. I can't say about all of those, but that's probably true. Yeah. Now, I can speak to that as it relates to us. And this may be new knowledge for you. If it is, then you can leave saying, well, I learned something tonight. But our discipline, the United Methodist Church, and for those of you who did not grow up and get really grown into the life of a United Methodist system, we are a representative government. Our polity is representative. Church conference, which you might have, you may not, but if you have a church conference, that is the most congregational thing we do. And it takes a lot of reasons to have a church conference. Now, if you grew up in a Presbyterian church or a Baptist church or a Lutheran church, any congregational church, you had congregational meetings all the time. But in the United Methodist Church, to have a church congregational meeting seldom happens. Seldom. I've served 40 years in the Methodist Church. The only time I ever had a church conference was when we were building a building. You know, and I served 8 churches, and they were all good-sized churches. Jarvis Memorial and Christ Church and Highland and Raleigh, Centenary Church in New Bern. Had a lot of stuff on the plate. A lot of decisions were being made all the time. And we never had a church conference. So for a church in the Methodist system to have a church conference, it has to be a significant reason. We are a representative form of government. You have a council. That council is formed every year and re-upped. And those are the people who make the decisions for others. And so in the light of that, that moves throughout. That's the same system. We have an annual conference, and it's the same way the jurisdictional conferences are handled, and that's the same format that the general church is handled. That is, we're all representatives. That's how we operate. The jurisdiction has no power over an annual conference. The discipline puts all the power of decision-making for for locality in the annual conference. And so you have an annual conference in Utah or California that ordains a homosexual. You raise that question. As much as a church in the Southeast would have against that, there's nothing legally we can do. The annual conference decides who are pastors and who aren't. They're voted on at annual conference. No annual conference can go outside their bounds. Now, let me flip that for you. Would you want somebody in California to dictate your polity? Would you want somebody in the state of Washington to dictate what goes on in North Carolina? Huh? Or New York? We are annual conferences, you know. But the General Conference has no power. Bishops have no power over the annual conference.
The General Conference does the Book of Discipline. The Book of Discipline forbids, takes a conservative stance. Yep. That marriage is between one man and one woman.
It doesn't say that.
It does say that. I have read it.
Okay.
So, they are breaking the Book of Discipline, and there's nothing being done. They are applauding.
I would argue there's not applauding because there's a lot of heartache and pain. And I hope I just answered it. We have no jurisdictional. There would be people who are not attending to the discipline. But I dare say if you opened up the newspaper today, you would find the same thing across the United States. You'd find the same thing in the Baptist church. You'd find the same thing in the Presbyterian church. There would be some Presbyterians that are doing something that another Presbyterian church doesn't like. I'll also tell you in the Baptist church, we have so many Baptist churches because they didn't like something that somebody said and they went off on their own. So to dictate, what I'm saying is we have no power in North Carolina Annual Conference to say to an annual conference in Washington. You can't. We could say, you're not disciplinary, you're not holding to the discipline, but that's as far as we can go with that. Yes? Yeah.
I'd like to go, are you wrong? Yeah, I'd like to go back and revisit the fact of the decision-making in 2024 between the globalists and the United Methodists. And if somebody's told me this, if we decided to disaffiliate now, the cost going forward would be sort of minimal. We have to pay like 3 or 4 months of something, maybe 40,000. But if we decide to disaffiliate after the end of this year or something, all of a sudden the United Methodist Church says, well, we own the property, we own this, it's going to cost, $500,000, $1 million for you to leave. You got to pay for the church, you got to pay for this, and you got to pay for that. I don't know whether that's disinformation.
I'd say that that's disinformation because no one knows that. Our present bishop, who's just arrived, she said she would uphold where we are now, our protocol as it is now. Trustees have indicated what we do in North Carolina. Now, I'm just talking about North Carolina Annual Conference. I can't speak to other conferences, but in North Carolina, I think in 24, the protocol will be what it is now.
Okay, can I ask you one other thing?
Yeah.
It seems to me that in 2024, when the vote takes place by the United Methodist Church, and we don't know what it is, but let's just say it changes the book of discipline to allow same-sex marriages and to allow practicing homosexuals to be a pastor, and that passes. The global church is on record as not doing that, or just maintaining the current book of discipline we have. Is that how you see it?
I don't know what their discipline is going to say, but I would suspect that that's probably accurate.
I have a question.
Yeah.
But, because looking at this, and, we affirm that all persons are individuals and of sacred worth, created in the image of God. I agree with that. But then when it goes down to the LBGQT community within the petition, the General Conference, for their members to fill the pulpit and to be permitted to perform same-sex marriage, that goes against Bible scripture. Is that not just opening the door for another Sodom and Gomorrah? Is it not? I would rather go by what scripture says in the Bible versus a man-made book that is printed up, And these people in these conferences, these are professionally trained divinity people, and they're going against the Holy Bible. That bothers me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say something. I don't know specifically this church, but I've been a member of several Methodist churches. The Ten Commandments says, thou shalt not commit adultery. There's a lot of people in United Methodist Church that have broken that.
Yeah.
And they are still active, well-standing members. So we need to be careful of what we choose to believe in the Bible and follow and exclude one group without excluding another.
No, the door should be open for everybody. That's the purpose of a church.
Exactly.
But not to fill the role of leadership.
Yeah, but your same scripture, you can take same text, the same Bible that you're referring to, and I'm not going to get in a biblical argument because I could, I've done scholastic work in Bible study and diving into Hebrew and Greek. And if we want to get into that, I can with you. But the same Bible says that all you women should have something on your head right now, and you cannot speak up in this space. Why? Because there are men here. Now, same Bible that you just talked about says that. The same Bible says you cannot have usury. So all of you bankers and anybody who lends money, who sells something on time, guess what? You're not biblically grounded. You're going against the Bible. Do you believe that?
I'll think on that.
Think on that. Yeah, it's there. It's there. And then there's a whole text on Jubilee. Every 7 years, what do? Well, there's no debt. You start over. How many of you all practice that? If you don't, then you're not biblically based. Huh? That's what I'm saying. I have. What I'm saying is we are not biblically based people if you really are going to now take text to live off of. I'm just throwing it out to you. I mean, to be honest with you, are we going to cherry pick text?
I think we can all agree we're sinners, but that's
Yeah.
why we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bill.
Hey, Bill, we are going to ask questions. That's what I want you to do. Don't make statements. Just ask your question is all that everybody's doing, okay?
Ask her questions.
Yeah, that's what we're about. We're gathering information. We're not getting up.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Pastor, and I love you.
I know you do.
I'm very disappointed in this meeting. This meeting here was called for a particular purpose, and it was stated so in that little flyer that you got. And as far as my part is concerned, if I were an attorney, I would say I have heard nothing come out except what the structure is of the church and this and that. I am totally disgusted. I say, welcome you as our guest.
Well, I'm still.
No, wait a minute.
I'm still entertaining
no,
questions.
let me say something.
Okay.
Because I'll tell you one thing. You may be, say, from the top of the church, and you are very welcome here. But I don't have to say, take anything from you.
No, it's all.
Okay.
It's there.
No, wait a minute.
I'm still
wait a minute. I said, wait a minute. I'm speaking.
Okay, I didn't know you. You have a question?
And no, you will not speak ahead of me when I've got this mic. Listen, brother, I'm a retired sergeant for the United States Air Force, and I'm dang well proud of it.
I can tell.
If we have another meeting to decide what the real reason is, and it's like having a white elephant walking around in here, it's invisible. And it hasn't got a thing to do that I have heard until this lady right here brought it up. And it has to do with the LBGQT, whatever that really stands for. We are here to try to decide as to whether we're going to leave the United Methodist Church or whether we were not going to.
Yep.
I remember when this organization of churches was, the Methodist was known as the National Council of Churches. Now I'm going back into the early 50s and into the 70s, 50s, because I'm 94. I've seen a lot of changes when we became part of the United Methodist Church. I said, boy, we have done shot ourselves in the foot. Well, anyway, you didn't want a speech, but you got one partly. I'm not going to say the rest of what I have to say, but I don't think that we are discussing what we should be here to discuss.
I'm ready to move on. I think I've said GMC, but you don't have to disaffiliate and become GMC. I can tell you a few more things about GMC. I've done the research on that for as little as they have out. It's a modified appointment system. How many of y'all grew up in a Presbyterian church. You know, the form of government is not dissimilar to that. You'd have a council or presbyters, elders in the church, who will make the decisions for the church. In our case, it's called council. And if there's a need for a new pastor, for whatever reason, that pastor leaves, that pastor retires, that pastor, you know, is not effective, then you will have a call system. It's on the borderline call, and the bishop will then bless that appointment. Now, understanding Eastern North Carolina as I have, because I've served all over Eastern North Carolina. My wife served as a superintendent where she had mostly small membership churches. You think it's easy to find somebody who's going to meet your need. And it might be. I'm not going to say it isn't. But I'll tell you, my wife Carol and Richard will tell you, they spent most of their fall trying to find pastors for the small membership church, because there are just not many. Just not many. And so, but it's not going to be on a Tuesday a pastor leaves and Tuesday afternoon you're going to get a pastor. It could take months to find somebody who's going to come serve you. But after you've decided who you're going to want, the bishop will, and you'll have a superintendent who will help you with that. That's why I said they'll give you names, and you'll have to do your research and do your interviewing, and you'll pick somebody. It might work, it may not. But then you'll have to do that again. You'll go back to the same superintendent and say, well, this isn't working. You'll get some other names, and you'll interview some other people, and then you'll pick somebody. And that's a system. I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I mean, Presbyterian Church and the Baptist Church have been doing, congregational churches have been doing this a long time. But that's what you would be moving into. Now, if you're an independent church, certainly it will be totally up to you as a congregation to find your pastoral leadership. The appointments, that's the appointment system. I also say about the GMC as it relates to apportionments. That's what the conference at. Yeah, you were going to.
I don't think we're at that point yet, but what do you all do? What is the process with Richard leaving? What is the process with Richard leaving?
Richard would say to his superintendent, Tara Lane, he would let Tara Lane know that I've been retired now 8 years, and I'm now going to officially not serve any other churches. And so she would call the staff parish relations or parish relations chairperson and say, we need to spend some time together. She would come and sit with those 6 people, and you would talk about this congregation, the needs of this congregation. And everything that's important to you needs to be conveyed to her. So then when she's working with the other superintendents to see what pastor would come here, she has all the information she knows about this congregation. And then the appointment would be made. And then there's an introductory visit, and that person would come and spend time with your staff parish relations and possibly ride around the community, get to know the church. And then that person would arrive here, July 1, or whatever that day is.
We have one right here.
Sir,
Yeah.
I've just got a simple question.
Okay.
I was raised right beside United Methodist Church when I grew up. When conference came around, when one moved out, we were having the other one move in.
That's right.
So, I mean, what's happened there? Is it because why wouldn't we know when, like, our pastor leaves, that the other one's not moving right in? I mean, I don't understand, because, like I said, I was there 20-some years and watched pastors come and go.
Yeah.
And when we were moving our pastor out, the other one came in the next day.
Yeah. And
I was there.
So what's the question though?
Well, I mean, you're saying that now, you made a comment a while ago that we didn't know when we would get our pastor.
That's under the GMC. GMC. Now, the United Methodist Church, we're so systematic. I mean, we got this thing down so pat that literally, when I left the congregation at 11 o'clock on Tuesday, I was responsible for all deaths and anything that happened in the church I was going to from 11 o'clock on. And the person who was coming in behind me was due at 1 o'clock, but if something happened in your congregation that morning, then that pastor had to respond to it. And I'll be honest with you, that's happened to me. I've gone into an appointment. The first thing I had to do was go see a family because they lost a loved one.
Well, I know I was just used to.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen with the GMC. That's not going to happen in the Presbyterian church. It's not going to happen in the independent church. That's not going to happen. I mark my word. That would not happen. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to change the emphasis on pastors coming and going.
Yeah, that appointment system.
Yeah, I'd like to look at congregations. 97% of all churches are run by volunteers.
Yep.
Only a few people at the top, some musicians, actually get paid.
That's right.
But the decision that we're being asked to vote on is what the people at the top have made. The people in the congregations have not made a decision where they want to come or go or buy out their churches or any of that stuff. They voted on it, but what's happening is our evangelism program is going to have to be sacrificed because our administration is willing to sacrifice a third to a half of their current congregations to make inclusiveness for the LGBTQ community and pastors, whether they're in the Southwest or the Northeast or any of that. So when you say we don't have a choice because the administration, and my question is, never once has our administration said that they have all gotten together and prayed and they have asked Jesus to approve of this program and the process that's being done. And I would like to know why we don't have one person. Obviously somebody's making decisions at the very top that this inclusiveness is more important than retaining the evangelism of the congregations.
When you say administration, you're talking about annual conference,
Yes.
the bishop and the
Yes.
cabinet, and they pray every day.
No, I said I haven't heard them say that they have that Jesus has approved this. But it's
Well,
the best process for what we're going through.
You can go on UMC on the website. I mean, every in the website every day I get stuff on the prayer list
Okay.
on what they're praying about. My wife was on the cabinet. I mean, they have prayer teams. They're praying earnestly to be led by the Spirit.
But have we heard from our administration that this is the best process that could be done to bring this inclusiveness into the churches by eliminating a third to a half of the potential past congregations that have worked for 200
Well,
years?
they haven't. The bishop and the cabinet and the leadership team in North Carolina Congress has anguished that churches feel like they have to leave. So there's no forcing anybody out. Let me say this to you in that regards. We've been in ministry 40 plus years, and you all have been a part of the United Methodist Church, many of you, for 40 plus years. I'm going to use the word compatible and incompatible. We have been compatible. We've never, in the Southeast, we have not agreed with people in California. We've not agreed on single issues. People in New York, we've been doing this for 40-some years. I'll be honest with you. I've been to general church meetings. I've been with people from all over the country and all over the world. And I've sat around the table. I have not agreed, but I've decided that we're compatible. I can live with you because of what we have in common. Right now, there are people within the United Methodist Church that are saying, what's happening now, I'm incompatible with. And so they're the ones who are leaving. When I say you're going to stay here in the United Methodist, that doesn't mean you agree. I'll be honest with you. When General Conference happens in 24, the most that's going to happen, whatever happens, the United Methodist Church is not going to tell you here at Village Point what you have to believe in as it relates to human sexuality. It's not going to do that. It hasn't for 40-some years, and it's not going to continue. It's not going to do it for the next 40 years. We have churches within the United Methodist Church for 40 years who have said we are open to LGBTQ community, but have now said in many different words, You know, we're not going to have you as Sunday school teachers, or we're not going to have you as leaders within the life of the church, and we certainly will not have you as a pastor. And we will not have gay marriages in here. We've been doing that now for 40 years. And we have said that we're compatible in that we can live with, if a church in California wants to do that, we're not going to force that on them, and they're not going to force something on us. United Methodist Church is never going to say to Village Chapel, Village Point, you have to believe this about human sexuality. You can, I just know that. They haven't yet, and they're not going to change their mind on that. Now, if the bishop comes to you and the superintendent comes to you and says, we have a person here that we'd like to send you away, and by the way, that happens to be gay, that subject probably would never come up out of the blue, because the superintendent, when your pastor has said they're going to leave, the superintendent asks these questions. I know this for a fact. Will you have a woman come and be your pastor? Church says no. Where the DS writes that down. They're not open to a woman pastor. Will you take somebody who's just been divorced? No. But take note of that. Will you take somebody who's just right out of college? No. They'll take note of that. Will you take somebody who's 65 years of age? And the church says, no, we don't want somebody that, and the DS takes a note. Now the DS is going to sit around a table with 7 other DSs and the bishop, and she's going to have, our DS will have all those things down there. Now there's names coming on the board. Well, I can't put their name in there because that's a woman. I can't put that person on this list because that person is too young. I can't put this person in because they're gay. I can't put this person on the list because they're too old. Now you're down to what? 1 or 2. And she's got to go to bats for you to get the person you want. And there's only 128 names on the board. But believe me, if you inadvertently say, now I would say to that staff parish relation, you're foolish if you give all those things, all those lists, of things, a person you're not going to get, because you really are eliminating. But if at the top of your list is the United Methodist Church is now ordaining gay persons. We just can't handle that. So that's at the top of your list. I can well assure you right now that the superintendent would be way out of bounds if they would force that into your church. That person into your church. Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the conference of 2024, okay. And you I understood you to say a while ago that Caroline would hold the money amount to going forward.
Well, she doesn't set the amount.
I know the amount. I'm just
okay.
Whatever amount it is. Okay. If she will hold that forward, what is the deadline of December the 31st, 2023 about if you don't disaffiliate before then, you won't be able to?
I don't know who's telling you that.
Yeah, that's what's on the website.
Well, it's not coming from our bishop.
Yes, it is.
Okay, you'll have to show me that because I've not seen it.
Okay, this is my question.
Here it is.
Okay, this is my question. Okay, so in 2024, say that the United Methodist Church becomes inclusive.
Yeah.
And when people look at that flag and that cross and flame, they're going to say they accept gay marriage. They accept. What am I going to tell the children? What am I going to tell the children?
What you believe.
You've got a flag. I'm flying a flag that is gay. Might as well be gay. In fact, I saw a minister with a cross and a gay flag.
Well, are you going to,
on the internet today.
well, that would be a church. I mean, your church, village. Yeah.
You're flying a flag.
You're riding down the road. You're riding down the road, and you see that. Okay.
And I'm working under a flag that tells children that it is okay to be gay. I will not do that.
Yeah. Okay.
I will. Or I'll start another.
Yeah, that would be a dilemma for you. I would encourage you to let your grandchildren know what you believe to be, and then they will have to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that, you know, there are a lot of flags being flown around down the streets that we can't adhere to, and you have to explain that to your grandchild why it's that way. I mean, you know, so it is a dilemma. I don't want to make that a moot point. Yeah.
I understand that that's part of paragraph 2553.
That goes out. That paragraph does go away. So that's the fear, that's the there's a belief that once that is out of there, then every annual conference can do whatever it wants to impose. I just told you that North Carolina, I've already heard it from this bishop, who actually I've known for a long, long time. She's from Mississippi, but I knew her in other settings. My wife and her were dear friends. And so I've met her, I've known her in other, and she has verbalized that she's not going to change the policy of where we are now. I know some of the trustees, we get new trustees, so I can't dictate exactly where but the trustees, let me go back on the property thing. You all have a valuable piece of property here, no question. But the United Methodist Church is not interested in going into the real estate business. I have been a trustee on district levels, and we have property coming out of the yin-yang that we don't know what to do with. So there may be a group that says, oh, we'd love to have Village Point, but guess what? If they open that up to say, would they get this, or you have to pay huge sums of money, well, but they have to take all the other churches that aren't worth anything, and then they have to keep them up, and they have to sell it, and they have to go in the real estate business. Believe me, our trustees, it's a conservative group, our trustees are not going to get in the real estate business. They're not going to charge you something because they don't want your property. That will be a major, 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 major headache. And so I think the idea of walking away with your property in 24 will stand true. Every year, though, the number as it relates to the retired ministers, unfunded liability, that's a moving figure because it's based upon, and it's going to go up for a while and then it's going to go down because the people who are making it go up are in their 80s and 90s right now, and they won't be around in a few years. So that number is going to consistently go down for any church that wants to disaffiliate. Right now it's a higher number. And that comes from Westpath in Evanston, Illinois. So that's a figure that comes somewhere else. Yeah.
And I will be clear on this because I've been around the bishop. Bishop Shelton is the name of our bishop. Yeah. And are y'all hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you just said, and I just want you to say it again, because this is very significant that we have kind of drawn that line as December 31 of this year, and then after that, January 1 of 24, then that 2553 or what, I forget numbers, is going to go away. And then there's been this mindset that they will, if we go and say in 2025, we do not like the direction of the United Methodist Church, and we want to disaffiliate. You're saying that Bishop Shelton has said that, and the trustees would have the mindset, and she has told you personally that she doesn't intend to change and make everybody buy their property. Yeah. So we go from 40-some thousand to $1.3 million. Yeah. That's what she said.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand you clearly.
Yeah.
So you're asking us to trust her. Is that in writing?
I don't know if it's in writing. I doubt if it's in writing. Yeah.
I did not grow up in the Methodist church.
Okay.
But my dad was Methodist, but I'm pretty new, few years, but I love the Methodist church. Having looked at this handout and listening to all the questions in your very nice presentation, I would like to ask a question. Would you say that this is a major issue of the UMC? This
Human sexuality, the human sexuality concerns.
is this a major issue of the UMC?
It certainly has percolated to the top. I think there are probably a whole lot of other important missional
issues.
A whole lot of missional issues that need to be met.
This meeting has certainly magnified that it's a pretty major issue.
Yeah.
With our
Yeah, that paragraph in the discipline that people are acting now upon to have disaffiliation. It's a small paragraph, but to repeat it, it could be read, but I can, let me say what basically says, and anyone else who wants to chime in can. One can disaffiliate on two grounds. One would be they're incompatible or do not like what's happening within a particular annual conference as it relates to human sexuality or other places, other jurisdictions, period. But it has to do with human sexuality. So this whole conversation about property, if you went to the table and said to the annual conference, we want to disaffiliate because we want to keep our property, that's not covered in that paragraph. It has to do with human sexuality. And right now in our annual conference, I don't know of any charges that are on the table as it relates to same-sex marriage or people that want to be gay. Now you could say that about another jurisdiction and you'd be accurate. You could be sitting here and say, we are incompatible. We disagree with what's happening in California. That would be grounds based upon that paragraph. When that paragraph leaves, who knows what the ground rules will be? We don't know.
Why is it leaving?
Huh?
Why is it leaving?
It had a duration. Now, it could be put back in. I mean, the General Conference could reinstate it. It had a period. And it was put in there, for a purpose, but it could be reinstated.
Well, could you mention another major issue that we might have?
In the Methodist Church? Okay, I'd say one of the biggest issues.
To our congregation.
Your congregation? Well, this might be apropos. It's a missional statement. The United Methodist Church has to come to grips with that 80% of Americans aren't in church. 8 out of every 10 people in the United States of America are not in church. You know what's the top reason when asked? Hypocrisy and judgmental. The two top things. People are not in church because the people who are in church are too judgmental and too dogmatic. I think that's something the United Methodist Church has to come to grips with. Talk to your grandchildren. Talk to your children. I have 2 daughters. The whole subject of human sexuality. Huh? We do have those. We do have those across the country. There are gay churches. They're not United Methodist. But, there's, yeah. I think the bigger issue is not the gay, etc. That is an issue. But young people, if you were to sit down and talk to your grandchildren, your children, they just don't see it as an issue. And there are a lot of other things that they just think the church is majoring in minors. They want to hear about Jesus. They want to talk about love. How do we treat one another? How do we really demonstrate our care? How do we live into our spiritual gifts? And that, to me, if you're asking what the United Methodist Church maybe needs to focus on, that could be a good starting place, yeah.
When is the actual date that there is a vote in the church to disaffiliate or not disaffiliate?
I don't know if you all set a time for, if you have a church conference. Okay.
I say something about March the 31st, but it don't say congregation, it just refers to conferences.
Well, I think, let me clarify that date. That has to happen to be approved by the annual conference in June.
Right. Now,
Just like the 249 had to get their paperwork done by, I think, September. I'll stand corrected on that, but sometime previous to the November meeting. And so that March date is just it's a date, and it's marked on the calendar, but that's to get approved for disaffiliation by the annual conference at annual conference in June.
right. I just want to say, I don't think that this whole issue, LGBTQ, it's not about removing members who are that, or other sinners, whatever they are. It's about who is leading the church and what they believe, and what we're standing behind in the people, the United Methodist Church or whoever it is, what their belief is. Because my belief might not be what theirs is.
Yeah.
So it's not about removing sinners. It's about who's leading the church.
Yeah, that's fine.
This will be the last comment. We really need to wrap up.
Ominous.
I'm thinking about
But, yeah.
joining the church here. We just left another church in Shallotte. And I'm on the fence right here because what I want to know is, what you're saying is that what I'm asking is the United Methodist Church going to accept gay marriage in this church is what I want to know. And if they're going to accept gay marriage, if they're going to marry gays in this church, I don't want to give them.
Yeah. Let me come back, and I can answer that really with a firm response. The discipline that we operate, that we talk about, we revere. It's interesting, so many Methodists now stand on the discipline, and for most of your ministry, you didn't even know what the discipline said, which is interesting. But the discipline says the married weddings in local church is determined by the pastor. Look at the discipline. The discipline says that. The pastor, I have said to couples, I can't marry you because I didn't feel like they were ready to be married. I had the power as a pastor to say that. The council could actually come in behind the pastor and say to the pastor, we do not want gay marriages here in this sanctuary. And it would be crazy for the pastor to do it, because that would probably be grounds for the staff parish to simply say, you got to leave. So really the power, now the Methodist Church can come along, the discipline, why are you shaking your head? Tell me, what is it? Yeah, what? Okay, I'll look up the role of the pastor. The role of the pastor is to decide who's going to marry. Now, the discipline can come along and say, the discipline doesn't even say you can't do gay marriages. It doesn't. No, but it doesn't say you can't do gay marriages. It doesn't say that. It just simply says homosexuality is incompatible with Scripture. The penalty has been added over all this time. The pastor, the local church, still has total power over who's going to get married here.
Well, Jesus should have it. That's in the Bible.
What's in the Bible? Okay.
But I think that's the ultimate thing. Pastor, currently Richard, has ultimate power, and he will respond to the congregation represented by the council. Whoever we talk to the DS about bringing someone new in, we will say, we want someone who's not
you say that.
And from what you've already said, the North Carolina Conference has pretty much said, we're gonna go that way anyway.
Go what way?
The Southeastern North Carolina Conference has already said they're gonna go towards the more conservative side.
What conservative will still come back down to what the local church wants. Now, the incompatibility comes in, if there's enough people in the pews here, it has to be 65% if you take a vote. I mean, 65% of you. That's a hard number to reach. 65% of you would have to say, I can't live with the idea that there would be a Methodist church somewhere else that would have a gay pastor or do same-sex marriage. You'd have to simply say, I cannot live with another place doing that.
So are you saying that we've got to have 65% of the people that say they want to disassociate with the church?
65%.
Now, let me ask you this question.
Huh?
Is it 65% of the membership or 65% of the people that come to
No,
vote?
remember, no, 66%, I use the word, it's 66%, it's 2/3, 66 and a half, 66.3, so I'm saying 60, no, of the membership.
Of the membership.
Of the membership. You have to be on the rolls, and and it has to demonstrate that you are a member of Village Point. So think with me. And you have to be present. Now, 66.3% is a high bar. I served a church, Jarvis Memorial, in Greenville, North Carolina. 2,000 members, huge church, seats 700. I preached Sunday out, 700 people. Can't even see the people in the back, it was so long. They voted back in the fall, and they had 61% say they wanted to leave. And that wasn't enough.
So they couldn't leave.
So they didn't leave. Now 50% of the congregation has left and started their own church.
See, that's the crying shame.
That's a crisis. That's the crisis. And I'll be honest with you, if this church takes a vote, a church vote, unless you get 85, 90% that want to leave, you're going to have division. You're going to have people pit against people. And the storm will be a 5-category hurricane.
I've just got to say something.
Yeah, yeah.
I know that we are a loving church now. And I know that people are going to have different opinions. You're going to be different probably than mine. I know that. That's just life. But I would like to say, because we are a loving church now, no matter what the vote is, why can't we be a loving church after the vote? That is my prayer to all of us.
Yeah, and I yeah, stay together. And I've already indicated I'm a United Methodist minister, and I'll remain United Methodist. But it's been my prayer. I've had conversation on this matter starting in 2016. Got ahead of it and had council meetings, and we talked and we went through things. And I've prayed about it a long, long time. And I'm convinced that if we do this change, the GMC or wherever churches want to go, if we do it not out of self-righteous indignation, but out of just what I believe, or what you believe, and that we do out of respect and care, I think God can help the GMC reach people that we haven't been able to reach, and the UMC will be able to reach people that we haven't been able to reach. And the kingdom will grow. It's always about kingdom growing. You know, the 2 commandments that Jesus emphasized was the great commandment of love. Love as I love you. And then the other was go into all the world, preaching, baptizing, telling them what I know, what you've heard from me. So it's the conversion of the world. And we've been on slow down in the United Methodist Church for some time now. And I think the GMC will reach people that we haven't been able to reach. But I'll be honest with you, the UMC will be able to reach people we haven't been able to reach in a long, long time. Did you know that probably 7 out of every 10 people have a loved one who's homosexual? So everybody's lives are touched. That's right. I understand that. I understand that. But most Americans are having to come to grips with human sexuality. And how do you work through that? How do you do it lovingly and caringly? And the United Methodist Church will reach people. Now, we're not talking about Christians who've been confirmed Christians all their life. We're talking about the millennials and the Gen Xers haven't been in church. They don't even know Jesus Christ's name except for in profanity. And now the UMC will be able to reach some people that we haven't been able to reach before, and I hope and pray that the GMC will be able to do the same thing so that the kingdom grows. And you all will have to make a decision. I appreciate the time with you. You can go on the website as it relates to GMC, and it's real clear as to what they're saying now about who they are as a denomination. But it is a work in progress. Because, I'll be honest with you, it's still, a lot of it's to be ironed out. So.
Well, David, I think that's a good note to end on, and that is kingdom building. And David, thank you for your information. I know everyone has lots of thoughts. There's a lot more questions that you have. And what we really want to come down and boil down to is, what is it? What is the issue that we're talking about? And that's with the educational committee that's working together to bring this information to you. Whether we answered any questions tonight, I'm not sure. Whether we created more, that might be a good thing as well. But we will continue to have discussion about this. There are some timelines, so it's really an accelerated discussion So thank you all for attending tonight. David, thank you very much. Pastor, would you close us in prayer, please?
We got a prayer here. Cindy.
Hang just 1 second, okay? Holy God of grace, we pause and we celebrate. Stay among us. Keep us together. As my dear friend Sarah said, let us love one another. Let us find new ways to love each other, and let us find ways to reflect you, so that the world will know that we're Christians by our love. Let us also realize that you call us out to reflect you in the world, even in our homes. Bless us, oh God. Give us a vision for what you would have us to be, and let this church always be united. In Jesus' name, amen.
I think everyone should say for boyfriend.
Yeah, that